guys, it's Beverly. I got my setup all ready to do the Caron Colorama O Go hat. Now, you guys have probably seen enough of these O Go's and you can see the picture right there, is you pull off the packaging and then you cut the plastic cording that goes all the way through the O Go and pull that out. Then you can separate the colors, and we're going to put them in plastic bags. So let me show you how I did mine. Okay, so there goes Sally. Okay, so I looked at the chart that comes with the pattern. Okay, right here. And at this point, I'm going to assume that you've already printed out this pattern. Caron Knit Hat on the Go. And you already saw Sally wearing the version 1. I'm going to be making version 2, but I'm also going to be showing you how to join colors, how to cast on a circular needle. We're going to use size 10.5. Right here it says 10.5. I'm going to be showing you how to read a pattern. Now, if you don't have the O Go yarn, you can use any 5-ply bulky yarn. Now, so as I was saying, I divided the colors based on this chart here. So I took color A and I put it in a bag that said, and I put a little piece of paper in there that said color A. Then color B, I did that one. See, it's just a little bit darker. Then color C is a lighter green, and color D is a darker green. And then last of all, color E is the gray. And as usual, something fell, on the floor. That's how all these videos go. There's two things that happen when you start to film a video. One of them, your mind goes halfway blank, and then the second one is everything falls on the floor. So that's the rule. Okay, so I have my 10.5-inch circular needles. Now you're going to notice that this one kind of has a bow in it. See how it goes in? And apparently when you hold these plastic ones, they kind of conform to a shape because of the warm, the heat of your hand. But I'm not worrying about that. These work just fine. But you do need a 10.5-inch needle. And so here's version 1. With version 1, we're going to join with color B. So that means we would take the bag marked color B, and we're going to cast on with color B if you're making version 1. But remember, I'm making version 2. But the techniques are the same, and I'm going to be inserting information about both as we go along. Now, again, it's very important that you printed out this pattern. So, at this point, you would need to print the pattern, and the pattern will be linked in the video below. You will need a set of, or a 10.5-inch circular knitting needles, and you will need 5 plastic bags if you're going to do it like we're doing it, 5 labels. Separate your O Go by color and cut them where the colors change as you pull it apart, and put them in bags. And so at this point, I'm going to begin the cast on. It's going to be a long tail cast on. Now for version 2, I'm going to be using this color here, which is color E. But don't get confused by my colors. If you're doing version 1, you're going to be casting on with color B. Okay? So what you're going to do is cast on right here. With circular needles and B, cast on 64 stitches and join in the round. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use color E. I'm going to cast on 64 stitches, join in the round, and then I'm going to show you how to join in the round, cast on, and all of it. So don't even go there. So once you've gathered all of your supplies, then you would proceed with this video. Okay, I have color E. If you're making version 1, you have color B. So what we're going to do is my tail is way over here on the side. I'm going to do what's called the long tail cast on. So I'm going to pull out, I've got to do 64 stitches here. So I'm not going to go too crazy. But you're going to pull it out so enough that you maybe 36 inches or more to begin with. And then you're going to make a slip knot. Now when I make a slip knot, I don't make a big deal out of it. A lot of people do. Just like my magic circle when I'm crocheting. I don't make a big deal. If you have made a slip knot in your whole entire life, make it that way. So how I make it is I put it over 2 fingers. So I got the yarn. I wrap it around 2 fingers. I take the thumb and put it up on the cross, and I take out my second finger. I put the working yarn behind and pull it through. And that's how I make my slip knot. I don't go crazy with it. And then I slip it down, and circular needles are always going to be fiddly. You may hear them hitting the table. That's just how it works. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my long tail cast on. And over here on the left side is my long tail. Over on the right is my working yarn. Okay, so here we go. And again, I said this cord is going to be fiddly. All right, so I'm holding the working yarn over here and the tail over here. So I got the slip knot on my hook. I'm going to take my thumb from my left hand and put it under the yarn. I'm going to go like under the yarn, over, and there you go. So you're going to see it again. So my thumb is under there. So you're going to see me do this 64 times. And my pattern's under my arm, getting ready to slip to the floor. Remember, that's how everything works in these videos. Half a brain and everything on the floor. And I move the camera, which I'm sorry about. Because see, you have to, there's a picture of me on my Facebook page of my studio. It's no studio. It's my kitchen table with my tablet propped up on something. In this case, it's propped up on a longer burger basket. And my back's a little twisted, but hey, we have to suffer a little bit for our art. Okay, so, and my washer's going. I hope you can't hear that because it's in another room with the door closed. And this is the long tail cast on. I'm going to show you one more time. So you take the yarns like that. I take my hand and pull up my thumb. I take the right, go in there, hold it, bring this around, and flip it over. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video and do 64 stitches. Okay, so now I have my 64 stitches, okay? And you may notice that what I do is I do 25 stitches and then I place a stitch marker. So I have 25, then I have 50, then I have 64. So I have 64 stitches, okay? So then what I'm going to do, and I'm going to be moving that fan in and out, because if you've done tutorials with me before, you know I get hot flashes. Okay, so half of 64 is 32. So that's what we're going to do. So we have 25 on this side, and then I'm going to do 26, 28, 30, 32. Okay, so 25, 28, 30, 32. And what I'm going to do is I've got a stitch marker like this, and I'm going to stick it in the loop of the stitch. Now the reason I added this stitch marker, not on the cable, is because as we're stitching this, we need to know where the center of our work is. Because what's going to happen at different points, these stitches are all going to come together. We need them to be separated, 32 on each side. So go ahead and do that because we're doing it in circular. And this goes for any pattern that you're going to do in circular. So you're going to pull this needle, the longer one. See, there's the short one, so don't let the stitches pop off. But you pull the longer cable and you kind of untwist the stitches, but you can do that after you get it up here on the end of your needle. All right, so here we know this stitch marker is the dividing point of our row. So that's why I put it, because if I put it on the cable, it's gonna roll around and blah, blah, blah. So I put the halfway point stitch marker on the work. Then I've got these two up here, and we're going to try our best. See how I have them? We're going to try our best, which means actually make sure it happens, that the stitches aren't twisted, okay? We're going to be taking this marker out and this other marker over here out, and we won't be using them. I used that only when I was casting on so that I could keep track of my count. Now, we need to join these in the round. So what happens, if you will notice that I have my tail and my working yarn on the back side. So you take the working yarn and put it over the back needle when you're going to knit the first stitch. You take and you pull this back needle around so that you can use it to knit with. And you go, this is your join. So you go in, see the working yarn is free. That's why I put it over the needle before I started. I inserted the hook, and I'm gonna wrap around as tightly as I can and knit the first stitch. Now don't worry about this because I guarantee you that this is going to close in and your hat is going to not have a ridge that's visible. Sure, if someone is searching for it, they'll see it. Okay, so that is your first stitch. Your join was your first stitch. Now my pattern, of course, is on the floor. So let me grab it. Okay, so we joined in the round. So row 1 and row 2, let's see. Yes, row 1 and row 2, we're going to be knitting in the blue color or the B. And then after row 2, we're going to join color E. So we joined it in the round. We're going to knit 1, purl 1, and repeat that around. So my yarn is going to be gray, but yours is going to be blue. And don't worry. We're doing this part right here on Sally. Okay? So we already knitted 1. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our stitch marker. We're going to purl 1. So the yarn goes in the front and you go in from the right of the stitch, out, yarn over, and there you go. So we have 1 knit 1 and 1 purl. To knit, you come from the left side, yarn over, pull through. Okay. We're going to purl so the yarn is forward. We're going to come in from the right, wrap it. You got 2, slip it off, knit, okay. Now, here is what we have so far. We need to, as you can see, I've got that in the middle for the work. We're going to push these stitches. Now there'll be times that, like right now, see how easy they slid over? But there'll be times that they won't, and we'll have to struggle or knit a few stitches till we can finally get this loose enough. And sometimes you can pinch this and this will, help it move. But so far we're doing good. So let's look at our stitches. We have a knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1. So now we're ready to purl. We got our yarn in the front, and we're going to purl, yarn in the back, we're going to knit, yarn forward, we're going to purl, yarn in the back, we're going to knit. And if you take a look at your stitches, the knit 1 does not have a loop in the front. The purl 1 has a loop in the front. So let's say you have to put this down and the phone rings and you're not sure which one you're on. This is a purl. This flat one is a knit. So at this point, I do yarn forward and I do a purl. And the next one is a knit. Okay. Sorry about that if I bumped the camera. Yarn in front, purl. Yarn in back, knit. And there was a purl and knit. Okay, you guys, so I'm going to go finish this. I'm going to get rid of this stitch marker. I'm going to keep sliding these stitches, and then I'll meet you back when we get over here. Okay, so here I am, and I've decided that I need to move this marker because I want my last stitch on this side to be a purl. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to purl this one and count our stitches. And then I'm going to place that marker. So hold on. So we want to have 32 on each side. Okay, I decided to have 31 on this side because I want to end on a purl. Okay, so I have 31 stitches and end on a purl, or you can have 33 stitches, but I want you to end on a purl because I know that when we start the next row, I want it to always be a knit, or the next half of the row. Okay, so for right now, I'm going to go ahead and stick this marker right here, and I just finished a purl. Okay. Okay, so this was the last stitch I worked. It was a purl. So now I'm going to take the yarn and put it in the back. I'm going to turn my hook, my needle. See, I was purling. This was where I was working. I'm going to put this to the back, and I'm going to turn the whole thing. Okay. I have the working yarn in the back. And it doesn't really matter at this point that it's twisted. Okay, just so I can have it free. Then I'm going to take this working yarn and put it over the back. Okay. Now I'm going to hold up this. And I'm not worried about this. Okay. I'm just concentrating here. My last stitch was a purl. So I'm going to take my working yarn, flip it on the back, because this first stitch is going to be a knit. I'm going to pull this back needle to the front, and I'm not going to worry about this until I get there. Now see, all these stitches are down. They're not twisted. I'm going to take, see, there's my working yarn. I'm going to take my needle to knit. I'm going to take the working yarn and I'm going to knit. And I'm going to pull it, but not extremely tight. But see, I've got it pulled in here. See, everything's not loosey-goosey, but it's not extremely tight. Now my next stitch is a purl. I'm going to bring it forward. I'm going to insert my needle. Now I'm going to pull this yarn a little bit tighter. Okay. Wrap it around and then finish my purl stitch. Now as you can see, it's not all loosey-goosey, but it's still nice and smooth. It's not, jerked or pulled. And then I'm not worrying about the rest of this because I'm just working on these stitches. And lo and behold, my working yarn, as I turned everything, became untangled. Okay, so we're ready for a knit stitch. So the moral of this story here is you position everything in the right position, or correct position, and then you knit the first stitch somewhat close, but not jerking it. The second stitch, whatever it is, whether if it's a knit or a purl, is where you tighten it up some to close the gap. Okay, so I have one knit, one purl. See, I have a loop. So that's how I know that's a purl stitch. Now I come forward and I do another purl stitch. So I have one knit, one purl, one knit, one purl. Now I'm going to knit another stitch. And I'm going to be moving the stitches towards the tip with my left hand as I go. Okay, so let's take a look at our stitches here. We don't worry about the tail, it'll take care of itself, but you can kind of move these forward. This stitch marker is going to be gone because it was what I used to count my stitches with. So I just did a purl, so I'm going to do a knit and a purl and a knit. So I'm going to pause the video and you guys keep knitting and purling till you get to the end here, and I'll show you what to do next. Okay, I just wanted to come back and show you that I'm having a little trouble pushing these stitches up on this needle. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to proceed with the pattern, and usually as you get closer and closer, you can get them in. And see how this tail, is like this. You can use this to push it in. And don't worry about this because your hat is going to come in. Because if you look, this stitch is pulled real tight, that one's pulled real small, and it will even out. So proceed with the pattern and slowly push these stitches into the working area. Okay, as you can see, I'm getting closer and I got those stitches to move. Okay, now I wanted to mention a couple things right here. Is a lot of people get really concerned like there while everything was kind of tangled, and you look at it and you go, this is too much of a mess, I can't handle it. Or let's say life happens, the phone rings, you put this down and you go, what do I do next? That's why I have these stitch markers here. That's why I explained to you what a purl stitch looks like and a knit stitch looks like. Okay? Later we're going to be checking off rows so that you know what row you're on. So there's ways to get through this, and we're going to do it together. Okay, so I have 4 more stitches, and so I got my fingers crossed. I'm going to end on a purl. Okay, so I have my 4 stitches here, and I just did a purl because you can see the loop. So I got to do a knit, and a purl. It might be a little tight, but push it through. And the further you push up this needle, the looser your work will be. So I like to do it about 1 inch, 1.5 inches. So we're going to do a knit and a purl. Now, this is the last purl, and you just kind of hold everything there because your tail is involved. Now, another tip. Sometimes, and we're going to pull down on the tail, sometimes you'll end up with another stitch over here. And that's because this part has got wrapped and your tail's got wrapped and everything. But if you count your stitches, you should come out fine. So this here is probably worrying some of you guys, but we're not going to worry about it. So that was row 1. So if you wanted to, you could put a mark by row 1. Now row 2 says to knit and purl and repeat all the way around, and we're going to join the next color. So let's do that. Now you're going to take your work. The first thing you want to do is take this longest one, because we want to always start with the 2 needles up here together. Okay, so we're going to come back over here to the left and pull that longer needle back through. That's why I put this stitch marker on the work, because it will stay stationary, and that lets me know that's the center. Okay, and we'll be moving that up as we go. Okay, so we're just going to kind of untwist these stitches a little. This stitch marker means that that's the beginning of the row, and this green one means that that is the center of the row. Okay, now if you're looking at my work, I have all my stitches going in the right direction. They're not twisted. So that's what I do after every row, is I get myself back together. So the first thing I notice here is my working yarn is in the front. We don't want that. We want the working yarn to be in the back. So I have to turn this, make sure all the stitches are going the right direction. My tail goes down, my working yarn goes back, and as you can see, I've got this piece doesn't go there. So I'm just going to back this up and put it down. Okay? And that's the part that we're going to be pulling in as we work. Okay. So we've got our stitches here ready to work. We're going to put our working yarn over the back because we're going to knit. If we were going to purl this first stitch, it would just be hanging down. But that's not in this project. The first stitch is always a knit. Okay, so the yarn goes over the back needle, pull it forward, and right now we don't care what's happening on this back end. Okay, see what I mean? That's why I've got this here, so that when the stitches come together, I know where the center of the row is, because we have to have this needle that's in my right hand free so that we can complete these stitches. Now row 2 uses the same color and the pattern is the same. Knit 1, purl 1. Okay, see, I got everything situated here before I start the next row, and that's what I do on every row. Okay, so my working yarn is here, my tail's hanging down. I'm ready to make my first knit stitch on row 2. So I knit it loosely, not loosey-goose, but loosely. Now I'm ready to purl. So I pull the yarn forward and I go into that purl stitch. I tighten my working yarn some and complete the purl. I go back to knit and see, look, that great big giant piece of yarn that was hanging loose is now been pulled in normally. It's just part of the process. So if you're doing yours correctly, it should look like mine. Okay, now knit the next stitch and purl the next stitch, and let's say the phone rings and you just drop your knitting. Okay, you know that you're at the beginning of the row. You know that this is a purl stitch that you just finished because this has a bump. The next stitch over here doesn't have a bump, so that's a knit stitch. So when life happens or the phone rings, I'm showing you how to catch back up on your work. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause this video, and I'm going to meet you back when we're over here. Now, as we go along, we're going to be pulling the cord. You can see the cord right there. We're going to be pulling that right here to separate the row. But right now, it's fine. As you're moving this along and it gets tight, then you'll be pulling the cord out here. That's why that stitch marker is there. It's not on the cord, it's on the work. So work on row 2 till you get over here and we'll do it together. Okay guys, so I forgot to say we're purling in the purl stitches and knitting in the knit stitches. So I think I'm going to move Sally here so on the next one so we have a little bit more light. And then as we're working this row, we're going to be, like I said, pulling this cord out. Okay, and that will kind of separate the rows. And that's again why I put that stitch marker there. Okay, see you when we get back down here. Okay, so I'm down to my last 3 stitches. So I've got a purl in the purl stitch and knit in the knit stitch and then purl. Okay, my yarn was a little tangled on my work area. Okay, so there's a purl on that last stitch. And that marker means that we're halfway through with row 2. Now, see, I'm doing this automatically. So here I am. I'm going to turn my work, take the working yarn, flip it over the back needle. And now what I'm going to do is pull this longer needle, see my left hand as I'm pulling this longer needle back into position. And you just kind of fiddle with it. And then I have my 2 needles back here, and I have my work. Okay, now if we had used a 10.5 16-inch needle, we wouldn't have to be doing all this repositioning. Okay, so that's the advantage of having a 16-inch circular, because you can do a hat without repositioning. But it's good to learn how to do this. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to finish the back half of row 2. So the yarn goes over the back needle. We pull the back needle into position. We're not worrying about what's happening back here because we have a stitch marker that tells us when we're at the end of that row. We're going to be moving these stitches forward and pulling the cord out as we go. Okay, so here we go. We're going to begin this section. So the working yarn is over the back needle. I'm going to come in as if to knit. I'm going to pull this up, but not, jerk it. And I'm going to knit loosely, but not loosey-goosey. Then I'm going to pull this yarn forward so I can purl. And I'm going to pull it a little bit more snugger, if that's a word, and purl. And if you take a look, put the yarn in the back so I can knit, we don't have any gaps in our work. If we do, this one can be tightened up, because that is our tail. But you can see how we're doing this here. Pulling it in so we don't have the gaps. And that's kind of the trick of knitting in the round on circular needles. So our next stitch is going to be a knit, and you can tell by the flat. I'm hoping it's not too dark. The shadows are coming as I can see. And so this one doesn't have a bump, so that's a knit, and this one's a purl. Okay, so when I come back, I'm going to try to have it a little bit brighter so you can see. And you guys finish row 2, and I'll meet you back because we're going to change color. Okay, now right here is where I'm pulling up or pulling out the cable. And if you take a look here, I pulled it so that I just have one stitch before the marker, and that's our beginning stitch of row 1. Okay, you guys, I've finished row 2. Okay, so what we need to do is turn our work And like I said, after every half row, we have to put all this stuff back together. So here's our marker, which we can move this marker up one more. So we can take this marker and we can put it up on this. And we don't want it on the cable, we want it on the work. So I'm just gonna hook it in there, okay? So we're going to take the needle that has the longest tail. Yeah, there's no sunshine here. It's raining in Florida. Okay. Oh, it fell off. So let's put it back on. And we just want to hook it into this middle part here some kind of way. And that's absolutely fine. Okay, so I'm pulling my cable so that my needle is coming back into position, making sure that the stitches don't fall off over here. Okay. And we have one stitch before the stitch marker is beginning of row 1, or beginning of the next row, the first stitch of the next row. Okay, so we've completed the cast on and the first 2 rows of the pattern. Okay, and so here's the pattern, and it says to join color E. So I hear myself from my other video. Hold on. Okay, so what we're going to do is join the next color. Now, if you're making the hat that Sally's wearing, you would be connecting color E, which is the gray color, or whichever color that you put in the bag labeled E. All right, I'm going to continue with the same color on my hat here, but I'm going to show you how to add or do a color change. Okay, I'm using a lighter color here, and see, that's what you're doing. You're going to be, you had 2 rows of the blue, and which was color B, and now you're going into color E. So don't pay attention to the color of my yarn, because I'm going to be taking this out. I'm using a light color so that you can see what I'm doing. Now, the pattern says, which I got to move this out of the way so we can see better. The pattern says, join E. With E, repeat the last round of knit, purl, ribbing, working until the beginning measures 4 inches. Okay, and then you're going to be switching to the next color. So if you look at Sally, which she's not in camera range right here, maybe if I tilt it, but you can see we start with the blue, we go with your gray, and that's 4 inches. Then we start with the next color. And then when we start with the next color, we're going to do a few more rows of the ribbing before we start the specialty stitch. Okay, let's add a color. Now, we take our new yarn, and I don't tie any knots, okay? And I'll explain it to you in a little bit. Now I'm going to take this yarn, and you can see I've got it about 2-3 inches, and I'm going to put it right through here, and you can see it hanging down. And I'm holding it. See how I'm holding it? And I have that new working yarn over the back, just like I always do. The old working yarn is hanging down. I'm going to take, and you can see it, it's right there. That's the new color. I'm going to pull this needle out so I can work. Again, I don't care what's going on the left side. I'm going to insert the needle as if to knit. I'm going to take the new working yarn, making sure that this hangs on because I don't want to pull it out. And I knit with the new color. You don't have to pull it too tight because if you pulled it, you would be loosening it from your tail. Slip the stitch marker. The next stitch is a purl, so we're going to wrap it around. And again, we're not going to pull it too tight because we don't want this tail to move. But we're going to cinch it up a little and purl. Now I've relaxed a little bit because my tail's down here and my old working yarn is hanging out in the back. So there's a knit. And there's a purl. And so you saw how I changed colors. And if you have to watch it back, go ahead. But there is your tail from your new working yarn. Okay, so I'm going to meet you back. Okay, so I went all the way across with my new color, and now here you can see I finished the last purl stitch. Then I'm going to turn my work. The working yarn still goes on the back, so the techniques are still the same. We just used a different color. So now what I need to do is pull back over here. Okay, now you can see we have two strands hanging. Let me see if I can bring them up. There we go. The green is the new color, and the gray one here is, yours could be blue or whatever color, and that's the tail. So those two don't get tied together. The working yarn from the previous row is this long one. You can cut this out like about a couple inches, and then you would, when it comes convenient, you tie the new color and the old color together. Now, when you tie them, I don't do a knot. I just do the first leg of a knot because I don't want any hard knots in my hat. So you can just kind of keep them together. You know, they'll be about the same length. You'll cut it off right about there, and they'll be about the same length. And now you repeat the same way as usual. You know, we pull this, needle back up here so that the two of them are together. It works the same way. You're just using a different color. And you tighten it in, just like before, and on the two ends. And you've changed your color so you can see how it looks. Now what you're going to do, if you're following this pattern from version 1, is you're going to knit in your gray color for a total of 4 inches from the brim edge, beginning edge, to the top of your gray color should be 4 inches. Let me move Sally in some, if you can see Sally. So that's 4 inches from the beginning edge. And then we're going to change color again. So that's how it works, you guys. So knit in the knit stitches and purl in the purl stitches, and keep this sides in so that you don't have any gaps, and I'll meet you back when you have to change color again. Or you can just rewind the video, follow your pattern, change color, and then what happens is when you change color the next time, which is your color A, you do that for 1 inch. If you look at the top of the video, you do that for 1 inch before we start our decorative stitches. So I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to work up to that section, and I'll meet you back. Okay, guys, here we go. So what we've done is we have completed 4 inches on our hat. So we're going to take a look at our work, and mine's a different color than yours, remember? But that's fine. So we're going to measure it from the beginning and see we have 4 inches. Now it's time to change the color. So if you're making the version of the hat that Sally is wearing, you are going to switch to color A. And color A you should have in your bag. This is color A. Okay. So in the version I'm making, I had put in color C. So what we're going to do is we have to do 1 inch with your color A of the same ribbing. So if you look at Sally's hat right here, you can see there's approximately 1 inch that will take this to make this 5. And when we have 5 inches from the beginning, then we'll be starting our specialty stitch that I'm going to be showing you, and we won't be purling anymore. It'll all be some form of knitting. Okay, so I wanted to show you where I did my color change from before. So I'm going to turn this over, and here is the second color, and here's the first color. And what I'm going to do, see, it's not tied yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut the second color, the first color, and get that out of here. And then I just want to show you that I don't tie a knot. I pull the work together and I just tie a partial knot, I guess we'll call it. This could come untied, which is absolutely fine, but what we're going to do is we would just do this partial knot, and then we're going to weave these tails in opposite directions, and that will keep the hat from coming undone. Because if we were to tie a hard knot there, you could definitely feel it. Okay, so we're going to get ready to start our next color. Okay, so I'm going to cut the yarn. Oh, you can cut it as long as you want, but I don't go crazy. 2 or 3 inches, and then I'm going to be saving this for my friend to make a pom-pom. Okay, so in your case, you're going to be looking for color A, and in my case, I'm going to be looking for color D. Okay, so you get your color. I think I have some coffee in my throat. And I'm getting my end, so find your end on your yarn. Okay, so the tail that I cut off, I'm going to put it inside the work. Okay, the new tail, I'm going to put it inside of the work, but I'm not going to tie them right yet because they would just come loose anyway. So I'm going to put the new working yarn off of the back, and if you can see down there, there's the tails that we're going to keep an eye on. Now I'm going to pull this out like I normally do and go into the first stitch as if to knit. Then I'm going to bring the new yarn over, but I'm not going to pull it real tight yet. Slip the stitch marker and then purl, and you don't have to pull it real tight, because if we did, our tail would come right out. Okay, and then we're going to proceed with this row in this pattern, and we're going to use this color, the new color, for approximately 1 inch. We're going to measure our work from the beginning till we have 5 inches, and then we'll be introducing the new stitch pattern. So I'll see you in a little bit. Move this a little bit. Okay guys, I got my 5 inches here. 5 inches, and you should have 5 inches. Now we're not going to change color. We're going to continue with the same color, but we are going to change our stitch pattern, and it's now going to be all knit but adding a special stitch. Okay, so we're not changing colors, so stick with your color, and you should be looking at your pattern. So let's look at your pattern, and I'm going to be flipping it back and forth. Okay, so now after 5 inches, where my thumb is, that's where we're at. It says proceed in pattern as follows. The first round we're going to do now, you're going to continue with your same color, is we're going to knit 3, and then we're going to knit 1, wrapping the yarn twice around the hook. And then we're going to knit 3 more, and then knit 1, wrapping the yarn twice around the hook. So that's what we're going to be doing now. So I got everything positioned here, and I'm going to pull. First thing I'm going to do is take my working yarn and flip it over the back, pull out the back needle, and we're not going to worry about what goes on the left side. Okay, and I'm going to knit 3 stitches. So go ahead and knit 3 stitches like we normally would. Slip the marker, pull it tight so we don't have our gap. That's 2, and here's 3. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start this next stitch as if we're going to knit. We're going to take our working yarn and wrap it once and around again. So it says wrapping twice. Then we're going to knit the stitch off, and you can see we have 2 loops. We're going to knit 3, 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to go to this next stitch as if to knit. We're going to wrap our yarn twice and pull it off. Now you can see I've got like an X there, and I just take and push it down. Okay, let's knit 3 more stitches. 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to go in as if to knit 1, 2. Knit off the stitch and then push these back. Knit 3 more. 1, 2, and 3. And then we're going to go in as if to knit, wrap once, wrap twice, knit off the old stitch, and pull these back. So you guys finish that and meet me back at the end of this row. Okay, I said at the end of this row, but I actually just meant at the end of this side. Now, if you take a look at what I've done, this stitch right here is where I wrapped it twice. Then I knitted 3. Now, the next stitch, I'm going to enter it as if to knit, and I'm going to wrap it twice. Okay. Now, what I like to do with this pattern is I like to have the last stitch on this side to be one of these wrap stitches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle and pull it. And what that does is that puts those last 2 stitches on the other side. Okay? So at this point, I'm really not worrying about the count. I just like to have the last stitch here be a wrap. Okay? So now I'm going to turn my work, And I know my first 3 stitches are going to be knits. So my first thing I do is put the yarn over the back, reposition the needles, and I'm going to move the stitch marker over here to the center. So let's take that out so that I can keep my wrap over here as the rows progress. So now I'm going to hook in my stitch marker. So what you could have done is you could have went ahead and knitted the 3 and made the last one, you know, that kind of stuff. But I just like having my last stitch over here be a wrap. And I got to make sure I didn't lose my wrap here. No. Okay. So I'm going to double check everything. And my last stitch over here on the back of the first side should be a wrap. And then I'll meet you at the end. Okay, so your last stitch should have been a wrap. So now we're ready for row 2. And again, we're using the same yarn. Now, did you look at all these letters here we got? It says to knit 3. Hey, we can handle that part. But this next part says SL1PWYIB. Did you guys figure out what that is yet? It's slip 1, purlwise, yarn in back. So it's so easy, but they sure made it hard. Slip 1, purlwise, yarn in back, dropping the extra loop. So let's do that. Okay, so I got my working yarn in the back. I'm going to pull my back needle out. I'm not worrying about what's going on the left side. I'm going to knit the first 3 stitches normally. So I'm going to knit the first one, slip the marker, pull the yarn tight for the next stitch, which is a knit, and the next stitch. Now, it says to slip the next stitch purlwise with the yarn in the back. So, our yarn is in the back. It's not forward, it's in the back. To slip purlwise, you put your needle in as if to purl and pull it off. That's all it is. It's kind of anticlimactic with all those letters. Now we're going to knit 3 stitches just like you normally would. And now we're ready to slip a stitch. Now see, there's our twist, so we can kind of untwist it if you want, but you want to be able to see this post. So with the yarn in the back, slip a stitch purlwise with the yarn in the back. That's all it is, guys. Knit 3. Untwist it if you need to, but what you have to see is this post. Keep the yarn in the back, insert the hook as if to the needle as if to purl, and pull it off. Knit 3 more. That's all it is for the whole entire row. So I'm going to meet you back when we're ready to do rows 3 and 4. Rows 3 and 4 are exactly the same. Okay, so I just finished row 2, and I got my needles repositioned, the yarn in the back, and both of them up here. Now we're ready for row 3 and 4. And row 3 and 4 are exactly the same. You knit 3 and you slip stitch 1, purl wise with yarn and back. So basically what we're doing is exactly the same thing. It's just that the loop is already down. Okay, so I'll show you what I'm talking about. So my yarn's in the back. I'm going to pull my needle out. And again, I don't care what's going on the left side. I'm going to pull this out and I'm going to knit 3 stitches the normal way. Pull that second one tight, knit the third one, and then there's the loop right there. So I'm going to leave the yarn in the back and I'm going to go in purlwise and slip the loop. That's it. Knit 3, 1, 2, and 3. There's the loop. So I'm going to leave the yarn in the back. I'm going to slip 1 stitch as if to purl, and I'm going to knit 3. Now, when I come back, I want you to finish this row 3 and row 4 are exactly the same. And then we're going to talk about changing colors and different things. And this is the part where I got confused. And so I did a chart. I'm going to show you how to make the chart. And we're going to figure out these next 14 rows. So finish row 3 and do row 4 exactly the same. And I'll meet you back. Okay, guys, I have finished rows 3 and 4. So you can take a look at what our work looks like. And now we're going to move on to the next section. Okay, so here's your pattern. And it says the last 4 rounds form the pattern. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be repeating row 1, row 2, row 3, and row 4 multiple times. And then down below there it says keep the continuity of the pattern, work color A for 6 rows. Then it says change to color B and work 2 rows. With color C, work 10 rows, and with color B, work 2 more rows. And that is before we start shaping the top of the hat. Well, when I read through that the first time, it kind of seemed overwhelming. So I decided to make a chart. And you, of course, can copy my chart. Now, a few minutes ago, I said that there was 14 rows here, but there's actually 20 rows because you have 6, 8, 18, 20. So let's take a look at my chart. So the first thing I did was I numbered 1 through 4, and then 1 through 4, 1 through 4, until I had it, I guess, 5 groups of 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I took a look at the chart, and it said, or excuse me, at the pattern, it said to do 6 rows with color A. So I wrote down A 6 times. So that means I'm going to have 1 full repeat of A, then a row of 1 and 2 of A, 2 rows of B, and then the 10 rows of C, and then 2 rows of B. So the easiest way for me to do it was to make a chart. So I want you guys to take a look at my chart. Now, I don't want to confuse you, but you guys know that I'm using version 2 to use up the yarn in this O Go. So I'm going to be continuing with color D and then switching to color B. And I'm thinking about doing it until the colors run out, but I also want to make pom-poms, so I'm not really sure. But if you're doing version A or version 1, this is the chart for version 1. So that's what it looks like. And the little check marks I made there was me as I was checking the rows off. So here we go. I hope you guys can see this and can understand what I'm doing. So pause the video, rewind it so you can get your chart made, and have fun making your hat. And I'll meet you guys back when you get to the shaping of your hat. Okay guys, I'm back. I did all the rows that were on our sheet, the 20 rows, and that's where you should be, whether you're doing, you know, your own yarn or the O Go or version 1 or version 2, whatever. We should have, at this point, you should have the 20 rows done, and you're going on with the pattern to do the shaping. Okay, so if you're doing version 1, we're going to switch to color D. So color D, I believe, is this color here. And you guys should have your yarn separated in bags and see there's color, there's color D on Sally. Now, you may be looking at your hat and you may be going, wow, this is a long hat. But remember, it has a big, nice brim. So we can fix Sally so that she doesn't look... We can fix Sally, but you know, you guys got it. So now we're going to start the shaping of the top. I think that's what it says. Yes, shaping top. That's where we're at. So, change to whatever color you guys are using if you're doing, you know, I already talked about it. Okay, so now we're going to knit 2 together, knit 1, and do 1 knit wrapping the yarn twice. So that's what we're going to do all the way around. Knit 2 together, knit 1, and then knit 1 wrapping the yarn around the needle. Okay, so here we go. And in a minute you're going to see a knot on mine. Don't even worry about that. I'm going to untie it later. Apparently this yarn did have a cut in it. Okay. So I gotta, hold on, I'm gonna reposition the camera. Okay, because I remember I have to knit around the camera. Okay, I got my yarn in the back. Let's pull up some here. And I'm gonna knit 1, so I knit the first, no, we're gonna knit 2 together. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take and slip this one off. There goes the stitch marker. I'm gonna put 2 stitches back. So I'm gonna knit 2 together, and then I'm going to put my stitch marker back, and then I'm going to knit 1, and you can pull tight on that second one, and then now we're supposed to do a knit wrapping it twice. So let me explain the knit 2 together. I just kind of assumed. Okay, so we have 2 stitches right here. So I'm going to take my needle and go in to the 2 stitches from the left side. Okay, I got both stitches there. I'm going to do a wrap and knit the 2 together. I'm going to knit another stitch, and I'm going to do a knit wrapping this twice, and of course my knot's going to show up right there, but like I told you before, I'm going to be fixing it. And then we're ready to knit 2 together. So again, you go to the left side of the 2 stitches, or the second stitch, insert the needle through both of them, and knit it off. Okay, so the next stitch is a knit and then a knit wrapping twice. So I'll meet you at the end of this row. Okay, so I finished row 1 of the shaping. And if you wanted to count your stitches, you could count, and you should have 48. Okay, now, and to me, it doesn't matter if there's 24 on each side. It doesn't really matter. Okay, now, so I already put a mark up here that I finished the first row of shaping when I made the first hat. So I'm going to put another mark up here, because if life happens, then we'll get interrupted. Okay, so now we're going to continue with row 2. And row 2 says to knit 2 stitches and then drop that extra loop. So that's all you're going to do. Knit 2, drop the loop. Knit 2, drop the loop. And I will meet you back. Okay, so now we're ready for row 3. So let's mark off row 2. Okay, and row 3 and 4 is a repeat. So you knit 2 and then we slip the stitch. So that's all it is, 3 and 4. So I'll meet you back when you're done with 3 and 4. And 3 and 4 are just like what we've been doing the whole time, only we're just knitting 2 instead of 3. So repeat rows 3 and 4, and I'll meet you back for row 5. Okay, I finished rows 3 and 4, so let's mark that off. And now we're ready for row 5. Row 5 says to knit 2 together and then do 1 knit wrap. So that's what we're going to do. And so knit 2 together, knit a wrap. Knit 2 together, knit a wrap. Okay? So I'll get you started here. And remember my stitch marker's there. So I'm going to take this and slip the marker and put it back on. And then I'm going to knit these 2 stitches and put the marker back so I can keep track of where I'm at. Here it is. And then on this wrap stitch, I'm going to wrap twice and knit it off. Knit 2 together. And then knit wrapping twice. And there you go. So I'll meet you back when you're done with row 5. Now we're ready for row 6. So row 6 is to knit 1 and slip off the wrap, dropping the extra loop. So knit 1, slip off the extra loop. And I just wanted to show you, look at Sally's hat, how it came out. Came out really good. And that's the part that we're doing right now. Okay, see you at the end of row 6. Okay, so I finished row 6, and row 6 was knit 1 and drop the loop. So 7 and 8 is knit 1 and slip the stitch purlwise, 7 and 8. So that's exactly what we've been doing, but only we're just going to knit 1, and we're going to do that for the next 2 rows. And then I'll meet you back, and we're going to do 2 double crochets 16 times, and we should have 16 stitches left. Okay, I finished row 7 and 8, and we'll be moving on to row 9. In row 9, we're going to knit 2 together 16 times, and then we're going to cut the yarn, leaving a tail, thread it through, and pull it tight and fasten. So right now, knit 2 together, I'll knit all the stitches 2 together, and I'll meet you back. Okay, guys, I finished row 9, knitting 2 together. Now what we're going to do is cut the yarn, leaving, cut the yarn, leaving a long tail, and thread the end through the remaining stitches. Pull tightly and fasten off. So that's what we're going to do next. Now, just a moment about the needle I'm going to use. I love these for thicker yarn. I don't use them all the time, but I love them for thicker yarn. They're the Susan Bates finishing needles, and they come in different sizes. Down at the bottom you can see the different weights of yarn up to bulky 6. I'm going to hold this closer, maybe you guys can see. There's the number. I think I ordered these from Walmart, but I know that they have them, on Amazon and wherever. Okay, so that's the type of needle that I'm going to use. Now, on the instructions, it says to break the yarn so you can weave it in. Now, based on my knowledge and experience, I don't cut that long of a tail. You can do as long of a tail as you want. But what ends up happening is after you thread this through and you've got a great big long piece of yarn, it's like you're wasting it. And I'm going to be needing it, hopefully, for my friend to make pom-poms. So I'm going to do about 10 or 12 inches, but I'm not going to go crazy with where I cut the yarn. Okay, so I cut my yarn, and I'm going to thread it up through, of course. And then what I do is I take a look at what I have here. This yarn is coming off of the back. So the first step I'm going to do is pull this needle through these stitches. Okay. And I know that this is, the beginning of round 1. So what I'm going to do is just take and pull that through. Okay. And then I'm going to take that stitch off, remove the stitch marker. I'm going to take the needle. I'm going to go through as if I was purling and take it off. Through the stitch as if I was purling and take it off. And if you wanted to, you could do 2 at a time. It's up to you. Okay, so now we have all of the stitches off of the one side of our hat. And I'm just going to lean that dangle. I'm going to turn the hat this way so that, again, I have the yarn coming off there. You can take your stitch marker off, but you can see I moved it up all the way as I was working. Okay, so now I'm going to take and move these stitches this way. Yeah, this way. Sorry, I was doing it the other way, but we want the end of the needle to be over here. Okay, so I'm going to take my working and as if to purl and go all through these. As you can see, I'm not pulling it tight. I'm just pulling it through the stitches. Like so. I guess I can do the last 2 together. And look, our needle is gone. Okay, now I'm hoping I can hold this where you guys can see me do this. But what I like to do is just kind of pull it a little. You can see I'm bringing it in a little, but I'm not going crazy. And, ooh, it looks kind of dark to me. Let's see. There we go. I'm going to turn another line on. Hopefully that'll help, but I think I'm kind of in my own shadow at this point. Okay, hopefully you can see it. Now, what I'm going to do before I cinch it in, too much, is a lot of times when I turn the hat inside out, I forget which direction I'm supposed to be going in. As you saw, the pattern for the hat wasn't that hard. But again, reading the pattern can be difficult. Now this other O Go I have, I'm going to make 2 more hats out of it because I really enjoy this pattern. It's not the same. This one is called, they got the label over it, but I ripped it over once, Tabby. And so what I'm going to do is, based on my pattern here, I'm going to use, like the color segments and go, okay, it looks like B is the darkest one in the group. So then I'm going to pick this one as B. And then, the next one, which is lighter, which is this, and that's how I'm going to divide it into our bags and use it for the next one. But if you guys get a O Go, or you've been wanting to try it, or you see them on clearance, here's how to do that hat that is on the packaging. So I hope you guys like the tutorial. Give me some thumbs up. Give me your feedback on the pattern. Thank you guys so much. Like and subscribe. Tell your friends. Bye.